you. Evelyn?
Okay, so we're live now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Caroline. Welcome to this virtual Cabinet panel on the environment meeting. This is being conducted with members and officers at various locations, communicating via audio, video and online. There is also the opportunity for the public and press to listen to and view proceedings. We also have contributors from various organisations with us here to provide feedback. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to take a roll call to confirm that the required members, officers and participants can be heard.
Okay, so we obviously have the chair, Councillor Amy Allen. We have Councillor Mick Debenham, Councillor Joe Graziano, Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Bryony May, Councillor Nash, Councillor Strong.
Yes, I can hear you and I hope you can hear me.
Okay. And then we have officers. We have Georgina Chapman. Present. I have Ellie Hollingsworth. Yes, and I have present. James Lees as well.
Ah, yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. And then for members of the public, I have speaker Sue Lyons.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. And that's it that's everybody, officers and speakers.
Marvellous. Thank you very much, Caroline.
Okay.
So apologies for absence. I understand that Councillor Tina Bartwas is unlikely to make tonight. Are there any further apologies?
Yes, I also have apologies from Ruben. Yes, yeah, from Ruben, the officer, policy and communications manager.
I thought it was quieter. I miss you, Ruben. Okay, thank you so much. Now, minutes of 20th March 2024. For the purpose of clarification, the minutes of the previous meeting can be moved and seconded by members who were not present at the meeting, although it is preferable that those who were not present should abstain from voting and commenting on the motion, on the minutes. I propose that we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meeting of the panel held on the 20th of March 2024. Could I have a seconder, please? I can't actually see any hands up.
I second it, even though I wasn't there.
Oh, thank you. Cheers, Mick. Hang on, there we go. I've got the participants thing up so I can actually see when hands go up. Okay, moving on, Chair's announcements. In accordance with Council policy, this meeting is recorded. The recordings will be available on both the Council's YouTube page as well as the Council's Modcast site. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under the Chair's announcements on the agenda. Members are reminded that the Council has declared both a climate emergency and an ecological emergency. These are serious decisions and mean that, as these are emergencies, all of us officers and members have that in mind as we carry out our various roles and tasks for the benefit of our district. More details are included on the agenda front sheet. I have agreed, so we've got some agenda items to move around, and I've agreed.
Before you do that, Amy, you've got a seconder. You've got a seconder for the minutes, but I don't recall that we ever actually voted on them.
We only vote if it's required. I can just quickly go to Caroline or Georgina to double check.
Yeah, Amy, just to confirm, yeah, we should just check if anyone's got any dissent against the minutes, but otherwise, yeah, if there's no issues with approving them raised, then yeah, we'll take them as approved.
Okay, so unless anyone's got a query about the minutes, we should just take that as done. Okay, right. So thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Strong. So anyway, order of tonight's agenda. I'll take the agenda items in the following order. So we're going 6, 7, 5, 9, and 8. I'll repeat that. 6, 7, 5, 9, and 8. Now I'm going to try and bring up the agenda myself so I can see it. Okay. So jumping straight to item 6. And we go into the work programme, and that will be Georgina to lead, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so essentially there's some familiar faces on the panel, but there's also some new faces on the panel. So I thought I'd go through a bit of the background of this before we move on to everything else. So this is the first meeting of the panel for this civic year. So a bit of background about the panel is that the establishment of a cabinet panel for the environment was approved on the 27th of June 2019. So we've been running for quite a few years now. We've had some amended terms of reference during that time, but ultimately the aim of the panel so far has been to set a work programme that can enable open discussion, enable members of the public to come and give their views and give ideas to officers and members, and it may lead to recommendations to Cabinet or the relevant executive members or service director regarding actions that people believe the council can take to address climate and environmental issues. So what we're going to do for today's meeting, because there's new members of the panel and it's the beginning of the civic year, is we're going to go through a presentation around what the council is currently doing on climate and sustainability. So current projects, current processes that we have, current kind of networks and groups that we work within, so that if people are interested and if people want to know more, they know who to go to, they know who to ask. Or if there's interest on particular subjects, we can maybe talk about the kind of topics that the panel would like to see in future meetings. So it's to kind of give you a bit of a flavour of the stuff that goes on. So usually with the information note, we go through some of the kind of ongoing projects, kind of maybe some of these are more smaller scale projects. So I'll just run through these relatively swiftly. So the first thing on the list is contributions to the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership. We'll talk a bit about what that is later. But so there's various projects that we do through that. So one of those is Solar Together, which again we'll talk about later. So we're on our second round of Solar Together, which is offering solar panels to residents in the district. 185 households in North Herts have accepted their solar PV offer from that round this time. And as of mid-June, 540 installations across Hertfordshire have so far been completed, and those installations are ongoing. And the price achieved for the average 14-panel system within the scheme was calculated as being 34% cheaper than the typical market price for an equivalent system. There's also some information on here about the Hertfordshire Growth Board, which I'm not going to go over yet because we're going to talk about that later in the presentation. The next thing is the local nature recovery strategy. So the local nature recovery strategy is a statutory spatial strategy that that every area of England has to create for identifying priorities for nature recovery and proposing actions to achieve those priorities. We're currently doing work with County Council on that. County Council are leading on the project, but they're working closely with district councils and other stakeholders or governmental agencies on that, and members of the public. And last night we held an event at Hitchin Town Hall, which was an engagement event for members of the public to get involved. And we had quite a few members of the public who attend this panel at that event, so that was great to see. And we'll talk a bit about that later as well. There's also the Home Upgrade Grant 2, which is ongoing. So the Home Upgrade Grant Phase 2 is a scheme targeted to off-gas properties, offering free home improvements to people who fall under a certain income bracket, who live in an off-gas property and whose EPC rating is D, E, F or G. So that is an ongoing project. The income threshold was it was available to people earning below £31,000 per year, but that's been actually boosted to £36,000 per year, partly to recognise that living in Hertfordshire is very expensive. So that's ongoing, and there's a link to our webpage in the briefing if anyone would like more information about that or would like the link to sign up. Public sector decarbonisation scheme, I'm going to skip over this bit because it's in the presentation later. Climate engagement, this is also a bit in the presentation later, so I will skip over that as well. And then the last thing that I was going to talk about in this information note is the North Herts Prosperity Fund, which is part of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. So the UK Shared Prosperity Fund was originally launched by DULUC, the government department, in April 2021, and that's part of the government's commitment to level up all parts of the UK. And so in July 2022, the council submitted an investment plan to access that allocation of the funding, and the final year funding allocations were agreed by Cabinet earlier this year actually, and that included £210,000 for a North Herts Prosperity Fund, which is designed to be used for parish and community projects. The policy and the community partnerships team have developed our criteria for that, and various kind of aspects of the criteria would allow for community groups or parish councils to apply for projects which relate to sustainability or environmental issues. So that is currently open for applications. It was open from the 5th of July and the deadline for applications will be the 1st of September. The community partnerships team are doing quite a lot of promotion of that, but there's a link in there. So if anyone knows of a parish council who might need some money for a kind of levelling up investment project, do let them know, and the same for community groups as well. And that is the information note. So I think that brings us to the end of this item. And just a reminder that there is an environment panel inbox, so it's environmentpanel@north-herts.gov.uk if anyone would like to email the panel questions or suggestions, or if anyone else would like to attend the meeting who might be watching, and you can always request to join by emailing that email address. I can see a question. Let me answer it.
Thank you so much, George. Is that question that's gone into the chat? Yeah.
Is this about unparished areas?
Yeah.
So yes. So as part of the final third year funding allocations that were agreed by Cabinet in March of this year, there was money agreed for town centres. So that was a kind of discrete allocation for town centres, hence why we've been a bit more targeted with the £210,000, saying that it should be for either community groups or for parish areas, because the unparished areas, well, I think actually in some of the criteria we've kind of said either parished or sort of an outskirts of a town rather than the town centre, because there is specific allocation for town centre projects.
Marvellous, thank you, George. Right, so I don't actually see who put their hand up first. I'll just go from the top left. So that'll be Mick Debenham.
Thank you. Just a couple of points, Ellie. The Solar Together scheme.
Yeah.
When is the second or the next round opening up? Do we know?
So there was a discussion about this at the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership, or the officer group counterpart, recently, and it was decided that we probably wouldn't participate in. So they run a cohort every spring and then every autumn. So we're just kind of closing off this current cohort because the installations are still ongoing. The discussion essentially was around potentially skipping the next cohort, which I think would be this autumn, because the uptake for the second cohort was lower than the uptake for the first cohort. So we thought that we would give that a bit of kind of breathing space before we kind of go into it again, and hopefully generate a bit more interest.
Can I quickly have a second question, Amy? Sorry.
You can have a supplementary, yes.
Yeah, it's not really a supplementary, it's something completely different. But on the home upgrade grant, does that count for dual income, 37k to qualify, or is that?
I think it's the household income, so it would be the income of people within that household. So if you're a single occupant and you're below that, then great. But I think if you're two people living together, I think jointly you would need to be below that threshold. Yeah,
that's fair enough. Thank you.
You're welcome. There was kind of we work with the Energy Hub as part of a consortia of other councils on this, and there was an attempt made to have the threshold increased to £39,000, but unfortunately that was unsuccessful. But there's kind of further schemes that are going to be coming out that are not just targeted to off-gas properties, and we're going to be trying to push for that higher threshold for some of the upcoming schemes.
So it's the uniformity across the councils across the county, yeah?
There's uniformity amongst the Hertfordshire councils. Yeah. The reason why we tried to put in a kind of bid for it to be increased to £39,000 was because Oxfordshire had put in a bid for it to be increased to £39,000, and they have been successful. And I think on the basis of the data around the cost of living in Hertfordshire and the price of property in Hertfordshire, we should have been successful in that £39,000. But essentially, the response was that it was kind of too late into the scheme to approve a change at that point.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, next was Councillor Joe Graziano.
Hi, Georgina. Good evening. Hello. Just two things. A lot of information you've delivered tonight. Is that available somehow? Can that be sent out? There's a lot of snippets that I can take away.
Yes. So if I will send this to you afterwards, but it should
Brilliant.
it should be in the reports pack for tonight.
Okay.
And we'll also go into a bit more detail on some of these things in the presentation, and then we can
Sure.
slides to everybody.
Okay. And the second point is at last council meeting last week, I raised the question to the cabinet member, when is the full EcoFlex, LAFlex scheme going to be rolled out?
Yeah.
Because that is something that will touch people with low incomes of £36,000, which I'm an avid campaigner. I think I bombarded you with emails prior to me being elected. I'm quite passionate about this, and I think it will be a significant thing that people can take offer on to receive a free boiler. So do we have any information as of last week? Please.
We do. I think I can talk about this. We do have a bit of information as of last week. So essentially the issue was around which team was going to resource this, because it kind of sits across different teams. It could sort of be with James in sustainability, or it could kind of be with us in policy, or it could be with environmental health. And this sort of stuff was originally with environmental health, but obviously there's various kind of resource issues at the moment there. So we did have a meeting to discuss kind of how that would be resourced. And we're kind of, I think James will agree, we're moving towards an agreement on that. And so we have engaged with the National Energy Foundation now, and they've sent us through the memorandum of understanding, the legal agreements, and the kind of data sharing agreements that we would need to get in place. And I think that shortly, in the next couple of weeks, we will probably James will be kind of making sure that those are in place, and that the data sharing agreement is agreed by data protection, and that the legal team have reviewed that MOU. So it is the kind of consensus now that it's gonna be moving.
Just hold fire for a bit longer.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Marvellous, thank you very much. So next up the question was Councillor Claire Strong.
Thank you. Georgina, you mentioned the sustainability projects and the new fund that's available, and that you're going to be the criteria for that. Could you get that circulated to members, please? Because also if you've developed them, also what about organisations in our particularly in the parishes who perhaps have already had a grant from the council for one thing or another? Are they eligible to apply to this fund as well?
I think they are eligible. I'll double check. But from memory, I think they are eligible, and I will make sure that the criteria gets sent out.
If you could just double check on that and let me know, I'd appreciate that as well. Thank you, because I know we're going to get asked. So
Yeah,
it would be useful to have that. Thank you very much.
Will do.
Yeah, perhaps we can sort out sort of recirculating specific things to all councillors, especially ones that are part of parishes specifically. Hang on, just jotting that down. There we go. Right. Claire, did you have another question, or is that a legacy hand?
No, I'm just trying to work out how. It's not exactly. I'm clicking on lower hand and it's not doing it for me, but I'll keep going.
If it's just wave. Right. Marvellous. So next up was Councillor Bryony May.
Yes, good evening. Thanks very much. Question about the North Herts Prosperity Fund.
Yeah.
The window for application seems quite short, particularly given it's over the summer months. Is that quite normal for this kind of thing?
It is.
And if so, how simple is the application process?
So I think it is probably quite normal. I looked at it and thought it was actually quite long. So I think it probably is normal for the kind of grants that we put out. It's about 2 months. It's I would say it's a relatively straightforward process. Because of where the funding's come from, we've kind of had to build the criteria around what is acceptable to the government department from which the funding has come. So it's a very broad fund. There's a lot of criteria points that a group or a parish could hit. The application form, I would say, is pretty straightforward. And what we're encouraging anybody who wants to apply to do is to speak to the community partnerships team, because they will kind of provide guidance in submitting your application, filling out the form, so that kind of once it's in, and they don't have to keep going back and asking for further information. So yeah, I would say that's a pretty okay process, but I might try and have a quick look at that while the rest of the meeting is going on later, and just kind of confirm those points that you've asked and that Councillor Strong's asked about as well.
Can I just come back and chip in on that? But because the point Councillor May said it's a short time period, I think bear in mind a lot of parish councils don't meet in August.
Right. Okay. I will feed that back.
Can I come back with the supplementary?
Yeah.
Amy, is that okay? Yeah.
I was just going to point out very quickly that the deadline on the Prosperity Fund, the money has to be spent by March 2025, not by us, but by whoever receives the grant. So you only really have a short time between the deadline and then when it's processed, and then when you get the money, you need to have a project ready to go. So I guess that sort of factors in as well, which is quite short, because I think it's quite unfair. But
yeah, that's helpful. That's actually very helpful context, because this fund kind of wasn't planned from the beginning. There was sort of a pot of leftover money, and this is one of the projects that we decided to do with it. That's why it's a bit kind of later in the game. And yeah, Councillor Allen's exactly right. It has to be spent by the group, who is the groups that are awarded the money by the end of March. So it is all a bit tight. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, sorry, just to clarify that bit there in case people weren't aware. Okay, sorry, Councillor Annie May, you had a supplementary.
Yes, thank you. So is there do you monitor applications coming in through that period? And if you feel that there hasn't been the response that you would hope for, is there any option to extend the application deadline?
So the community partnerships team will monitor the applications as they come in. And obviously, like I said, they're kind of trying to speak to most groups that put in an application or that express interest. I would say, yeah, theoretically we could extend it if we were short on applications, but there is a joint spreadsheet which is kind of showing us all the applications that we've got in so far, all the groups that are intending to put in applications, and I would say that it's probably unlikely to be undersubscribed based on we've had it open for a couple of weeks and based on the amount of interest that we've had so far. Okay,
that's great, thank you.
Whilst we're talking about funding, if there is a group that any councillor or anyone member of the public is aware of who is a registered charity and needs money, or a small amount of grant money under 10,000 for a specific thing, not a chunk of money towards a bigger thing, but an under 10,000, they're a registered charity. Morrison's have a Morrison's Community Fund, they're just on a community spaces fund where that deadline has just passed, but they have an ongoing community fund set up with the champions that you can look at and have a read through and apply online. If it's under 10,000, you're a registered charity and it's not towards a larger project. Also, because you have to be a registered charity, the process is a little bit simpler to apply, because a lot of the hurdles that you would normally have to jump to get access to almost anybody thing like we've done at the council is a little bit more simplified, because you've already passed those bits. So I will happily pop that in the chat or email that to anybody. I've got the details somewhere. But yes, if you think there's anyone that could benefit from something like that, it's well worth looking into Morrison's Community Fund. So just bring it up there. Okay, so I've got Diane Ketcher.
Yeah, would that apply to a group like the Electric Organic Gardeners, for example, who are a subgroup of a registered charity? We're not an individual one, but we are a local group of.
The charity themselves will probably have to apply, and then I guess maybe find out in the process if you're allowed to buy, if they also want to use the money for that particular thing. I don't know if they can then. I don't know how it works with a charity applying for money and then gifting that money to another group, because that feels.
Well, we are in the same group, but we just happen to be a local section of it.
Okay then. So yeah, then I mean, the best thing you can do is I'll send you the link, Diane, and you can have a read through and see about applying for it to see what happens. The worst they can say is no. So always worth a try.
Yeah.
Diane, I can put you in touch with the community partnerships team to talk about that.
Okay, thank you.
So sorry, Diane. I thought you were asking about the Morrison's one that I was just saying about. I didn't realise you were actually talking about the Prosperity Fund specifically. But you could look at either.
Oh, I've assumed that Dan is also talking about the Prosperity Fund, but I might be wrong.
We're passing phrases in it, aren't we, Georgina? That's how we work best. Right. Okay, so yeah, look at both. That would certainly work, Diane. Okay, does anyone have any other questions or comments or anything? I'm just having a quick scroll up and down. Nope. Okay.
I think John just asked if bids would be eligible for the Prosperity Fund. I don't think they're specifically excluded, and I know we've had applications from them for other similar grant pots, but that would probably I can check that with our community partnerships team.
Marvelous. Okay. Just double checking the messages. All right. Okay. So so that's been the work program. No questions. And now, if there isn't any more on that, we're going to move to item 7, introduction to climate and sustainability work at the council. And that is James Lees, climate change and sustainability project manager, Georgina Chapman, policy and strategy team leader, Ellie Hollingsworth, policy and strategy trainee, to present.
Okay. I've got to. Can anyone see my screen? I'm not sure if people can see my screen yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
No.
I've forgotten how to do Zoom. It says that I'm disabled from sharing. Could Caroline or James give me those permissions, please?
It was March when we last had to do this, so.
It's still not allowed yet.
Yeah. When I was trying to log into Zoom earlier, my laptop seemed to be very much like Zoom. What is Zoom? What is this? Never heard of it.
Still not doing it. To share screen, that's fine. When I clicked, now it's working. Excellent. All right. Thank you. Is that okay? Yes. Can you see this? Does that work? Can you see that?
Not yet, Georgina. No, sorry.
Still no. Okay. Let's try again. Can you see it now?
No.
No.
Sorry.
George, if you want, let me just share.
Yeah, do you want to share?
Great idea.
Might be easier.
Cool. So I share the screen and put on. Right,
thank you. That's perfect.
Full screen. So you can see that as full screen, yeah?
Perfect.
Yeah. Genius.
Thank you. Yes, so we thought, given that we have some new members of the panel and some people that are new to being a district councillor here, we thought we'd take you through some of the work that we're currently doing on climate change and sustainability, some of the processes, some of the key people and some of the key groups that we work within, so that you know who to get in contact with if you want to know more about something, and all the kind of key bits that are going on at the moment. So it would be great if people have questions, please do put up your hand in the middle of the presentation so that this can be kind of interactive and you don't have to save all your questions until the end. So can I have the next slide, please, James? So the structure that we're going to do a bit of background to our work, to our climate work, and why we're doing climate work. We're going to go over the key officers and the key groups that we work with and within. We're going to talk about the current projects and the current action at the council. We're going to talk a bit about the biodiversity work, because I know this group usually has quite a lot of interest in biodiversity, and there's quite a quite a few biodiversity things going on at the moment. We're going to talk about partnership working, and that's mainly around the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership, because we do quite a lot of work through that group. And then lastly, we're just going to sort of hone in on the environment panel and ask you to think a bit more about what you want the panel to achieve and what sort of things you might want to talk about going forward. I think next slide, please. And I think the next slide is James or Ellie. Ellie, maybe.
Yeah, yes, me. Hi, everyone. I'm Ellie Hollingsworth, the Policy and Strategy trainee. So yeah, just a bit of background for the panel. So as mentioned in the chair's announcements, the council has declared a climate emergency and an ecological emergency. So in May 2019, we declared a climate emergency, which basically asserted the council's commitment towards climate action beyond sort of government targets and international agreements. And this is currently set out with our climate change strategy spanning from 2022 to 2027. And in July 2023, we declared a ecological emergency, which set out the commitment to nature recovery, biodiversity net gain, habitat restoration, sort of through strategic priorities, planning and development. So we'll have a little bit more about that further on in the presentation. Next slide, thank you, James. So background for just sort of general sustainability. So sustainability refers to the ability to fulfill the needs of today's current generation without compromising the needs of future generations to come. So sustainability is one of our council priorities. So sort of in this presentation, we'll be focusing on more of the environmental sustainability rather than financial. So yeah, we've got 2 targets for net zero. So the first is to be net zero in our operations by 2030. So that's sort of covering scopes 1 and scopes 2, and to be a net zero district by 2040. Next slide. Thank you. So just background on sort of who does the work for the council. So on the officer side, we have Sarah, who is our climate change lead. So she is Service Director of Place, and sitting under her is James, the Climate and Sustainability Project Manager. And then within Policy and Communities, we have Ruben, the Policy and Communities Manager, and then obviously George and myself working on this sort of day-to-day. Next slide, thank you. So for sort of councillor side of things, we've obviously got Mick and Amy both here. So yeah, regular sort of meetings with those, just to keep the sustainability on our radars. And we'll go a bit further into detail on how we keep Mick up to date on these items. And I'll pass back over to James for the next slides. Oh, we've got a question.
Yeah, question
Sorry.
from Roger.
Just about to pop in with that, apologies, right? Do you want to take that? Roger, are you able to do that now?
Just a quick question. The local plan SPD, where does that fit into the schedule of discussions this evening?
I can try and so the SPD is not on the agenda for this evening. However, we are going to talk about what you would like to see come to the panel in future meetings and what you want to talk about. So that might be something that you want to raise in that section a bit later on, Roger, if you want to talk about the SPD.
Okay, that's fine. I look forward to that.
And Roger just said I responded to your question on the chat, just in terms of you were asking if it had been approved yet, the draft SPD. It hadn't been approved. It's been, I think the planning team been working on it after they consulted on it in January. I think the plan was to take or is to take the updated version to cabinet for approval in the autumn. But yeah, we can cover that later if you want to talk about it later.
Thank you very much.
Just to add, I was at the project board this week and we saw the updated SPD then, and I think it's going to the next cabinet meeting.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Cool, great. So yes, just to quickly introduce myself. See my picture before. So I'm a climate change project manager at the council. I don't attend all of these environment environment panel meetings, but I joined the one back in March to talk about one of the projects that we'll be talking about later here. But my role is essentially to pick up some of the actions we have in the strategy and kind of try and move forward on delivering some of them, but also to kind of work with the policy team in terms of how we deliver the wider strategy and link up across the council. So most of the action at North Herts Council on climate is driven by the current climate change strategy, which covers from 2022 onwards. It's got kind of three focuses: taking action, which is kind of our own emissions, enabling action, which is kind of the work we can do to support residents to take action to reduce their emissions, and a kind of communicating and engaging side as well. So then within the strategy, there's kind of a few kind of cross-cutting themes as well, which is then plays out in terms of how we've been delivering climate action at North Herts Council. So on one of the areas is on governance, and on the next slide I'll be talking about the officer group we've got, but that's also driven by leadership and having a member, kind of a lead member for covering climate change as well as environmental issues. We've got as Ellie highlighted Sarah, who leads climate change at the leadership as well. We've got a number of policies which are helping us to particularly on our kind of taking action section of the strategy, helping the council to move towards kind of low emission options. So we're turning over our own fleet towards being ultra low emission vehicles or EVs. We're moving away from gas, where as changes come up and things need replacing. And there's also a role of in terms of planning as well, in terms of a policy to enable the wider district to reduce emissions. As Roger was saying, in terms of the sustainability supplementary planning documents as well. We've got a number of processes which are helping to again helping to move the council forward, whether that's kind of embedding a bit more sustainability in our procurement processes, but also there's now a tool in the project management tools we've got, project management process we've got, to make sure kind of projects are helping to deliver on wider environmental sustainability. And we're talking about engagement throughout the presentation. So one of those areas around governance I wanted to highlight was this. We have a climate and sustainability officers group, which is a cross-council officers group which meets quite regularly. The aim of that group is to focus on identifying gaps where we can work jointly across the organisation, and also to ensure different teams and departments are able to feed into the strategy. And I've got this little onion diagram here, which from the Climate Change Committee, and just to highlight the members of that group can all feed into the different ways that a council can help to reduce emissions, both its own emissions, but also the wider district's emissions. So whether that's like kind of the emissions we have direct control over, such as our own buildings. So we have the property services team attending that. We have teams with vehicle fleets attending those group meetings. In terms of our outsourced services and contracts, we have the procurement team attend, as well as contract managers. The planning team are very heavily involved in terms of the role of place shaping to help reduce emissions. Then we have teams like Enterprise. We have the community engagement team, as well as comms communications teams as well, which kind of link to this kind of the wider influences that the council can have to help businesses, help members of the public, and help the kind of wider community to move towards reducing emissions. So this next slide is for Ellie, I think.
Thank you. So just to touch on communications in terms of climate action. So hopefully some people will have seen North Herts Climate Hive. So there's a little snapshot there of the project page. So we launched this back in March 2023. So yeah, this is our engagement hub for climate and sustainability. And we use this to update residents and council officers on sort of the latest climate action that the council has taken. So we do regular updates on surveys, local events, awareness days, new funding rounds, and sort of sustainability tips as well that people can take. So we're keen to get residents' ideas as well on sort of how we can meet our 2030 and 2040 net zero targets. So we've got a couple of engagements up running. There's a snapshot of one there as well on the slide. And we encourage residents, officers and councillors to all sign up for updates, which are sort of fairly regularly, and to take a look at the project page. So next on communications, so briefly mentioned that we sort of keep Councillor Debenham up to date as the exec member for Environment and Leisure. So we do monthly environment briefings, which sort of cover our latest sort of action that we've taken, work that's ongoing, and also sort of similar local events and things that get put on the Climate Hive. So this briefing also gets shared on the Members Information Service, the Staff Consultation Forum, and also on our internal intranet for staff to look at. So also we have our message board for staff as well and councillors, which we pop on any surveys and awareness days. So most recently we did Great Big Green Week and also Bike Week, just to highlight climate change and stuff that people can engage with regularly. We also do new starter briefings, so we sort of give background on sustainability to new council staff. Those happen quite regularly throughout the year, so we attend those. And lastly, we do a couple of sustainability sessions. So we've delivered some at personal development mornings for staff and also at senior managers group. Those have been both hybrid and in person and have had quite good attendance. And we get quite a lot of questions from those. So yeah, just keeping it on people's radars really. And the next slide is for James.
Yeah, back for me again. So this is just a bit of a mishmash of some of the achievements we've had on environmental sustainability. So I suppose one of the key areas and a major source of our emissions as a council is our leisure centres. And prior to being awarded the funding, which I think was discussed in a couple of slides, we'd already done quite a lot in terms of improving the energy efficiency of those sites, whether that's kind of changing the covers for the pools or moving lighting to energy efficient forms of lighting, as well as some work around our outdoor pools as well, which are kind of quite energy hungry when they're operating, so to make them more efficient. I realise there's a hand up from Roger. Should I take that now or?
Yeah, Roger, if you want to come in with your question.
Oh, sorry, I'll just jump into the last item there, the risk log. Does your risk log include the Gulf Stream stopping, which is one of the things that's potentially on the cards, very catastrophic for the UK if the Gulf Stream stops? That would, I imagine, be one of the most major climate risks that you should have in your register.
So I think, well, I mean, George is the lead on this, so we should probably leave that to you.
I can talk. Yeah, I'll talk about the risk log a bit later in more detail when we talk about the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership. I'll come back to that.
Cool. Yeah. So a few of.
Sorry, James. Is John Webb's question, has that just popped up just now? That's in the chat. That's taken. Hang on a minute.
James re SPD, is that one? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that one. I just couldn't quite. Is as we haven't answered that, have we? Would you mind just going on that with George?
I think it's it's a good point in terms of likely changes to national planning policy, and whether it would affect the need for the SPD or not. But the way that sustainability supplementary plan document was set up was to give developers or house builders with a few options that they could take across sustainability. So I think kind of regardless of what happens at a national level in terms of if there are some improvements on national planning policy, there will still be greater ambition which could be delivered through through this kind of gold, silver, bronze standard. And I believe the focus of it is now on kind of like eight key sustainability themes. So I'm sure there will still be a lot of it which is relevant, kind of regardless of any immediate changes to national planning policy.
Okay. So yeah, thank you for answering that, James. For John, I knew we'd had an SPD question. Just realised that on YouTube, obviously people watching can't actually see the question, so I'm just going to read it out. So we've just got the answer. Was the question RESPD to take cabinet for approval in the autumn? Much will have changed by then. Will a public mini consultation be arranged limited to such national policy and matters arising? So that was the question. James just gave the answer. So now Mick Debenham's got his hand up. So Mick, what's yours?
Yeah, it's just to do with on the SPD. Are we thinking? Am I right in thinking that currently we have no policy on solar panels? Are we wanting to bring in some kind of minimum for new developments?
It's a planning question.
Yeah.
Nick, I think I don't mind if you want to answer. I was just going to say you cut out a bit for me there, but I think you said that you think we don't currently have any policy on solar panels, which I think is correct, because I know members of the public have asked about if we could have one of those at meetings of this panel quite a lot of times, and as it stood, we couldn't, because the supplementary planning documents can't create policy. They can just flesh out and provide details to the policies that are already in your local plan. So I'd have to review the specific content of the SPD again, but I don't think the SPD in itself will be able to make panels on new houses mandatory, but they might be able to kind of encourage through this sort of bronze, silver, gold,
exactly,
kind
of system.
Because we've got a net biodiversity gain targets, haven't we?
Yes.
Can't we have even if it's 20% or something, or on developments bigger than 100 houses or whatever,
Yeah, so we're gonna come on to biodiversity net gain a bit later. So I'm gonna write that down and I'll come back to that again later. Yeah.
Right up.
Watch this space, we'll be here soon. Right. Back to James, who I interrupted.
So yeah, no problem. Yes, so just a few of the kind of successes we've been delivering on across the council, really. So in terms of our fleet, that's moved very quickly from being a largely kind of petrol diesel powered fleet to very much now kind of electric or ultra low emission vehicle fleet, particularly driven by Careline, which is the service delivered by Noah Parts, where their EV fleet has expanded quite a lot very quickly. And that's meant there's been a need for additional on-site charging as well for those fleet vehicles, which has been delivered as well, which means our emissions from our fleet, which is kind of quite a small proportion of the council's emissions, is decreasing or moving to being electric. On biodiversity, we talked a little bit about planning and biodiversity net gain, but through our green space team and John O'Connor, the green space contractors, they've been delivering a lot of biodiversity measures. I believe Andrew Mills spoke at this meeting back in March, talking in detail about some of the some measures which have been delivered, and one of the kind of most publicly accessible those achievements is related to the B corridor, which has been a great success in Letchworth, and I believe there's the discussion about how easy quickly that can be expanded elsewhere across the district.
Can I just pop in there, James? Royston has been earmarked for the next one, and plans are at an advanced stage to get that up and running.
So moving quickly, and definitely. So yeah, and there's also been ways we've been, as George was talking about in terms of Solar Together, Hub 2, where we've been trying to help support households in reducing their emissions as well. And we've already mentioned the risk log, which George will come back to. A ongoing project which I wanted to highlight is a pilot project we're running called Solar for Business. So we only launched it publicly a couple of weeks ago, although I did speak to this panel back in March about this project, and it is again uses a bit of funding from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund with some council investment. And the premise of the project is North Herts Council pays to install solar panels on the roofs of commercial units, and then the businesses within those units then benefit from using cheaper renewably generated electricity, which kind of saves them money on their energy bills. It reduces emissions, and it also brings in a kind of a long-term revenue for the council, which to pay off the investment to cover the investment of the solar panels. It's a pilot project. We're aiming for just 5 businesses using the funding we've got, and we're aiming very much at kind of those businesses based in industrial units around the district. So in industrial estates in Letchworth, Royston, one or two in Baldock and in Hitchin as well. And that is there's businesses are able to submit an expression of interest for the next. It's open to the end of this month, we'll then engage kind of what interest we've had from there and how we take that project forward. But it's a bit of a beginning of how we can help the businesses in terms of reducing their emissions, because they don't always have the capital to invest in some of this stuff themselves, and they have challenges in terms of building ownership and stuff. So it's a way of contributing towards the council's 2040 net zero target. So that's a project that's ongoing, and the next project I think is Ellie.
Thank you. We just there's a question in the chat about.
Oh, sorry.
I'll just quickly read the question out. I think there's actually a couple of comments and questions. So I've got. So sorry, it's a tiny little box. I'm trying to very carefully scroll through.
With regard to the question on solar panels on the leisure centres, that is part of the decarbonisation scheme.
So that's already going to be happening anyway. And then there's also a question from Brian Ketcher, which, so the question is, the previous question for those who are watching and can't see the questions was about leisure centres and solar for business. Are the leisure centres eligible? To answer that question specifically, we can probably go into it a bit, but we are, they are part of the decarbonisation process of our leisure centres that we're doing. So Diane's question is: are there any plans to loosen the rules on conservation areas, example town centres? So the south-facing roofs can be fitted with solar panels. Actually, specifically, I think the heritage is involved in that one, and that's an ongoing thing. But is anyone else able to elaborate on any further areas on conservation areas and the rules? It's more of a planning question, isn't it? I'm sure we can take that to the relevant officers to ask.
I'm not sure about other conservation areas. I know in terms of the Heritage Foundation, they were looking at modernising their design guidance, and I think that might already have been done. But when I last checked, I think it still said that solar panels shouldn't be visible from the street. So if that's your south-facing route, if you're in one of the heritage areas, it's different if you're in one of their modern character areas. But if you're in one of the heritage areas, I'm pretty sure panels still shouldn't be visible from the street. But I can double check about the other conservation areas.
So it's a great shame that rule is in place. I now get every opportunity I can get about being a bit more progressive by the Heritage Foundation. Right, Roger has got his hand up. So I'm just going to bring in for a question and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to clarify. The Heritage Foundation situation is quite simple. In the heritage area, you can put them on the back and maybe the sides, but definitely not the front. In the modern area, like Highfield and William Way, you can put them anywhere around the house. You can put them on the front, but no one in Highfield or William Way has yet put them on the front. But it's within the rules of the Heritage Foundation to put them on the front in the modern era.
Thank you, Roger. Right, I just take us
Actually, could I just clarify another point about the leisure centre? I spent some time on the roof of the leisure centre, and for the benefit of the new councillors, it's an ideal roof. The Letchworth Leisure Centre, it's an ideal roof for a large solar array. You get the benefit that the pumps and the heating inside the building require all that energy, so it would use its own energy. We fell flat on trying to do that as a project as TTL because the owner of the property and the user of the property are two totally different organisations, and they couldn't get mutual agreement on how to handle something like benefit from joint electricity.
You're going to like this next slide, Roger, if you're interested in panels on the leisure centre roof.
Marvellous, thanks, Roger. I'm going to assume you were on the roof with permission. I'm not just up there for fun. Right. Georgina, if you take it away, please. Or James even.
Yeah, I'm on this slide. Thank you.
It's Ellie now. Thank you.
That's all right. So the public sector decarbonisation scheme. So we were successful this year in a bid for 7.7 million to decarbonise North Herts Leisure Centre, Hitchin Swim Centre without the outdoor pool, and also Royston Leisure Centre. So as part of this decarbonisation scheme, we've got gas boilers and combined heat and power systems being replaced with air source heat pumps and other energy efficiency measures, so external cladding and insulation, particularly around sort of the pool halls where a lot of energy and heat is obviously expelled. We're also putting solar PV on the roofs. At this stage, we're not sure how big the array will be, but I'm sure that we can update you sort of in months to come once the works start on those. We've also got the detailed designs are currently underway and the project will be completed by March 2026. So it's a 2-year funding scheme, and the energy usage should be reduced by 68% and save over 1,000 tonnes of carbon annually. So that is all of that for PSCS. Thank you, James. So the next project currently ongoing is a climate strategy review. So as of May 2024, with the local elections, we've got sort of a new makeup of the council and in for a 4-year administration. So work's currently ongoing for an updated council plan, and a review of the climate change strategy will follow that as well. So CSOG that James mentioned earlier, so that's sort of the group that will be helping to develop the sort of the review of the strategy. And we're looking for a broader strategy to encompass more areas, not just carbon reduction, but also sort of covering the ecological emergency and the new biodiversity duty.
So let's talk about biodiversity for a bit, because there's these 3 kind of key things that are going on at the moment. So the 3 pieces of this puzzle are the biodiversity duty, biodiversity net gain, or BNG, you'll often hear it referred to as, and the local nature recovery strategy, or the LNRS. And all of these are legally required by the Environment Act 2021. So if we, James, please have the next slide. So if we move on to the duty, so as of January 2024, there's a duty on local authorities to consider not only what they can do to conserve biodiversity, but also what they can do to enhance biodiversity. And we kind of asked to publish objectives and policies and actions around this. And the first step was to do a review of the current actions that we take around biodiversity, and then kind of identify the gaps or any future actions that we could be taking, and sort of develop some objectives that sort of that kind of group what we want to do. Mick, I can see you've got your hand up. Do you want to?
Yeah, I just want to answer the question in the chat about the outdoor pool in Letchworth.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the reason that's not included is because to be eligible for the grant, the boilers have to be on end of life, which is sort of 10 years. So they're too new, the boilers at the outdoor pools. So when they do become eligible, we can try again, and you never know. In the next review, we might get lucky again. Thanks,
Mick. Councillor Graziano, you said, could you clarify for new people what is SPDs? So SPD stands for Supplementary Planning Document. So that is kind of documents that you have hanging off of your local plan. So your local plan sets out where all the housing and all the infrastructure is going to go in your district. And then that local plan kind of has policies within it, and then the supplementary planning documents kind of hang off of that local plan, and they provide further details, and they kind of flesh out the policies that you've put in your local plan. So that's what those are. And as kind of we talked about earlier, there's currently a sustainability supplementary planning document in draft, which will try and kind of encourage developers to do more sustainable development and sort of have a bronze, silver, gold categorization, where we're sort of trying to say to developers that they should want to try and be gold. So that's what that is. So if we go back to the biodiversity duty, so yes, we have to review our progress against the objectives and the actions that we develop, and you have to do that on a regular basis, and the first review will be in 2026. So what we've done so far is we've sat down with green space colleagues, planning policy colleagues, and development management colleagues to kind of identify what are the current actions we're all taking, and what further actions we could take, and kind of flesh out some objectives. And then we should publish those as soon as we can. We were waiting to try and do this review of our climate change strategy, as Ellie mentioned, because the plan was to sort of develop that into a wider sustainability strategy that's got the kind of carbon reduction stuff in it, plus the biodiversity duty objectives in it. So that's kind of ongoing at the moment. And the planning policy team recently hired an ecologist, and she really wants to get involved in the biodiversity duty stuff as well. So I'm going to meet with her in the next couple of weeks to further discuss that. And then we'll be discussing it with Councillor Debenham as well, as we kind of go through that sustainability strategy review. Next slide, please. So yes, biodiversity net gain. And I've got to remember that I had a question from Mick on this earlier as well to answer. So biodiversity net gain, or BNG, is legislation that requires developers to leave the environment in a better state than before the development took place. So when a development takes place, often it will kind of deplete biodiversity on that site. And the point of biodiversity net gain is to essentially say that they need to put back the amount of biodiversity that they've depleted through their development, plus they need to add 10%, so there's a net gain. So from February 2024, that applies to major developments, and then it also applies to minor developments as of April 2024. And a key part of BNG is that the gains have to be legally secured for 30 years. So a developer can't just kind of put their biodiversity net gains on a site and then a couple of years later that site gets sold off for development. That can't happen. They have to be legally secured for 30 years and be appropriately managed during that time. So there's a kind of hierarchy for delivering biodiversity net gain. So typically the developer should be looking to provide this net gain on the site of the development, but often that's not possible because whatever they've built has kind of taken up a large part of the site's footprint. So what they'll often need to do in order to provide this 10% net gain is to offset some of that biodiversity on other sites. So ideally, we want them to try and offset it at a site that's quite quite local to the site of their development, rather than going further afield. And then the sort of last case scenario is that they would purchase credits from national government. So they're basically buying biodiversity net gain credits if they can't put them anywhere else. But those credits are, they're not priced competitively because the government are trying to get the developers to put the net gain, the biodiversity benefits locally, rather than just buying credits, which will then be used anywhere nationally. So biodiversity net gain will be a consideration in planning applications. And really what it is an opportunity to get private finance to improve biodiversity and also to improve biodiversity within Hertfordshire. That's kind of our aim with it. So if we go on to the next slide.
Before we jump to the next slide, I've got Diane Kirch's hand up and also Mix.
Yeah.
Also can see actually that we've lost 2 people off the call, one of which is Julie Chegwin and the other is James Lovegrove.
James had to leave. I'm not sure about Gilly.
Oh, okay, right. No, that's fine. Oh, yeah, because we're past that time, aren't we? Yeah, I'm just messaging Gilly, but we'll carry on for now. So Diane had her hand up first. Fine, if you want to give your question.
Yes, you were saying, if I remember rightly, it was the developers of a site who has the responsibility for these biodiversity net gains.
Yeah.
It said, did you say that, and to maintain them for 30 years?
So the
whose
gain
responsibility is that going to be? I can't imagine it happening.
So the gains have to be legally secured for 30 years, and that's so that developers can't just put them down and then go and sell the site or build on a site. But they won't necessarily be doing that maintenance. What will probably happen is, so for example, and we'll get onto this a bit in the next slide, but for example, there will be landowners it might be a council, it might be another private landowner who will have sites which they will essentially use to say to developers, hi, I have a site that I want people to put biodiversity net gains on, and they'll essentially that could potentially be lucrative for some landowners. So they'll be kind of advertising their sites for developers to come and find them and say, okay, yeah, we want to pay to put whatever amount of net gain they need to provide. We want to pay to put that amount of net gain on your site. And then as part of that process, they will agree, there will be some kind of legal agreement or contract whereby the developer will have to pay whatever landowner they're putting their gains on the site of to maintain those for 30 years. That's all very complicated, and I don't know yet fully how it's been figured out, what it would cost to kind of maintain those over a 30-year period. But luckily that's not my job. That's the job of people in other roles and at county council and that sort of thing. So I can, when I have more detail on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Mick, do you want to just give your question?
Yeah, this is probably a bit silly, but the developers have got to do the net gain, preferably on the development. If they can't, they've got to do it locally. Does locally mean within the district, or can it go over borders? What I'm thinking of is, say, Stevenage or Central Beds or Welling and Hatfield have got a development and they can't make the net gains. Are we on standby saying, oh, we've got some stuff over here if you want to fund your money into North Herts?
That's not a silly question at all. That's a very good question, and it's a question that I've asked before as well. So if we go on to the next slide, there's a bit about that on there, and then I'll kind of keep answering as I'm talking. So essentially, yeah, so as I think you can all tell from your questions, this is going to take a lot of planning and preparation to deliver this successfully, especially given that it applies, there are exclusions. It doesn't apply to self-build. It doesn't apply to people doing extensions of their home, but it does apply to minor and major developments now. So it applies to a great number of developments that are going to be coming through the planning application process. So part of the preparation and planning. So County Council, for example, have set up a site matching service, which is where they put out calls for landowners who essentially want to do what I just described to Diane. They want to make their site a place where developers look to go, okay, can I put my biodiversity net gain on your site? And then they've also put a call for developers who are looking for sites, and then they're trying to match them up. So one of the things is that the biodiversity net gain should be like for like. So whatever kind of habitat might have been lost, you should be trying to replace like for like. You shouldn't be trying to replace a woodland with a water body or something like that. So they'll be kind of matching based on various kind of criteria, but that's something that is underway that they're doing. And part of the point of that is to try and keep the net gains within the local area, and particularly within Hertfordshire. But the question that Mick asked is something that I've asked before, because, you know, some, for example, some more urban councils like Stevenage or like Luton, for example, might have limited space to kind of facilitate limited land on which to facilitate these biodiversity net gain offsets. So I've also wondered whether they might be looking for other locations, particularly if it's just kind of over their borders. And there's not really a neat answer to that. Potentially they could. It sort of depends on. It kind of depends on whether the councils in those areas have done anything like this and have kind of tried to prepare to make sure that there's sites available in those locations. But there's no saying that if there was a developer doing something, for example, in Luton, and then they looked across the border and they found that there's somebody who's got a site that's available to put biodiversity net gain on in North Herts, but in that kind of section, you know, that's near Luton, there's nothing to stop that developer putting those gains there if they've kind of already tried to put it on site and that's not really worked. Or, you know, sometimes they might be able to provide some of it on site, but then they might still need to put some of it elsewhere. So there's nothing to stop that. And I think we're, you know, with this kind of site matching service, we're trying to get as ready as we can to make sure that we certainly maintain the gains from developments that happen within Hertfordshire. But I don't think anything specific has happened yet on sort of trying to poach biodiversity net gain from other areas development. But I can ask my colleague at County Council if that's something that he's considering. Just write that down. Okay. So some of the other kind of elements of the preparation and the planning. So the Planning Advisory Service produced a biodiversity net gain readiness checklist, which was actually a really long checklist of kind of all the different things that councils should be doing in order to maximise this opportunity to improve biodiversity in the district and make sure that we kind of get the most out of developers really on this. So we have policy and planning colleagues have kind of gone through that and essentially written down what's happened against each of those points on the readiness checklist, whether they're started, in progress, complete, and who would be responsible for doing them if they're not started, for example. So that's kind of underway to make sure that we can maximise the opportunities from biodiversity net gain. And then also there's been training for planning officers, particularly development management, where they need to kind of be able to assess biodiversity net gain as part of planning applications. And as I mentioned before, planning has now hired an ecologist, and part of her role is to kind of do this work of assessing biodiversity net gain in planning applications. And yeah, the key thing is that we want to try and keep net gains from local development in the local area. Thank you. So the third part of our biodiversity puzzle is the local nature recovery strategy. So this is also required by the Environment Act, and it's a kind of statutory spatial strategy, and it's interested in comprehensive nature recovery. So not just biodiversity, but also air quality, water quality, kind of elements of climate adaptation where we can put in place nature-based solutions, and also public accessibility to nature and green spaces. It's a strategy which is kind of being developed. Its development is being led by Hertfordshire County Council, but it's also a collaborative strategy. So there's a Hertfordshire Nature Recovery Partnership, And there's a board which oversee everything, and then a steering group who kind of drive the implementation. And then within that kind of steering group, there's specific task and finish groups for different areas. So there's, you know, task and finish groups around data and mapping and that kind of thing. District councils are involved as well, as are other stakeholders like governmental agencies, Natural England, the Environment Agency, and then groups like the Wildlife Trust. They're all kind of part of this Hertfordshire Nature Recovery Partnership. And then as well, what's going on at the moment is kind of broader engagement to try and engage members of the community groups. So last night at Hitchin Town Hall, there was an engagement event, and there was a big map kind of showing what the kind of state of certain habitats are within Hertfordshire at the moment, and that map will develop as we get more feedback from residents and from community groups and from our other stakeholders. There is an engagement survey at the moment, and I'll put the link to that in the chat in a minute. But essentially, we're looking to find out information about what local people know about the nature in their area. We're asking them to kind of plot key sites that they know about on a map. We're asking us to tell them what are the key species in their local area, the key habitats, what they think is important for nature recovery. So I'll put the link to that in the survey. There's still engagement events coming up in other places across the county. And then there'll be a second round of engagement in kind of September, October time, and then there'll be a final round of engagement towards the end of this year. So there's plenty more opportunities to get involved in that and to promote it to community groups. And the draft is expected by March 2025. I'm just looking at a question from Sue. How does this policy engage with farmers? So they've done some specific engagement events with farmers and landowners. I wasn't part of those, so I don't know exactly what happened at them. But yeah, they've been doing specific engagement with farmers and landowners. Essentially, when we're asking residents to provide information about kind of sites and species that they know about, it doesn't have to be land that they own. It can just be, you know, they say, oh, there's a wildflower meadow here that I want to tell you about, or there's this kind of thing here, or there's this species that is here. And really it's about kind of trying to understand. I think what everyone could see from the map that attended yesterday is a lot of the habitats are very kind of fragmented across Hertfordshire, and really what this is about trying to do is see if there's opportunities to link up networks, and sometimes that might not be possible where there's kind of private land and the private landowner doesn't want to get involved, but there are opportunities to attract funding by kind of making your land part of local nature recovery, these kind of networks. And then, so this will be the Hertfordshire Nature Recovery Strategy that we produce, and then that will link up with all the other nature recovery strategies for the rest of England, and they'll all kind of be knitted together. And there will be consideration of sort of cross-border areas, because obviously the whole point is about creating nature networks, and some of the boundaries are obviously administrative boundaries. So the team that are working on it are making sure that they're connecting with other neighbouring councils to kind of make sure those networks go cross-border. Next slide, please. I'm just going to look at John's question. Thank you, John. Thorough consultation on the local nature recovery strategy from county officers and North Herts policy and strategy team from scratch. Thank you very much, John. The last couple of bits we're going to talk about is partnership working. So the kind of key partnership organisation that we engage with is the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership. So that is a strategic group, and it's comprised of Hertfordshire County Council and all the district and borough councils in Hertfordshire, and also Hertfordshire Futures, which was formerly known as the Hertfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership, or the LEP. The group is the lead partnership organisation for collaboration on climate and sustainability issues across Hertfordshire. We were established in 2020, so we've been going for about 4 years now, just over 4 years, I think. The University of Hertfordshire also attend as a kind of unconstituted partner and critical friend. And the aim is to work together on climate and sustainability issues that affect Hertfordshire, and to kind of drive progress on those issues, achieving a greater impact together than would be possible individually. Next slide, please. So the structure of the group is kind of like this. So the HCCSP itself is member-led. So there'll be a representative, a council representative from each council attend. And then there's a counterpart group, which is the officer group. So that's the Hertfordshire Sustainability Officer Group, or HSOG, and that has officer representatives from each council. So the HCCSP is sort of in the middle, and they delegate down to the officer group. The officer group goes away and does various pieces of work and then makes recommendations back to the HCCSP. And then above that, there's the Hertfordshire Leaders Group and also the Hertfordshire Growth Board. And so the HCCSP kind of reports and makes recommendations to those groups, and the Growth Board sort of delegates back down to them. And we're going to talk about that, I think, in a little bit. Next slide, please. I think this might be Ellie.
Yes, thank you. So key sort of members for the partnership. So we've got a newly elected chair for the HCCSP meetings. So Councillor Simon Speller from Stevenage Borough Council. And then the vice chair is Councillor Keith Hoskin from St Albans City and District Council. And our North Hertfordshire Council member rep is Councillor Mick Debenham. Next slide. So the partnership has priorities, sort of priority areas of water, biodiversity, carbon reduction, transport, behaviour change, and climate change adaptation. So there is a subgroup for each priority area, and this is made up of officers from HSOG. So North Herts Council leads on the biodiversity subgroup, but we also have officers from North Herts that attend all subgroups. So yeah, there's also a strategic action plan for each of those subgroups, which can be viewed on the HCCSP website. And I'll hand back over to George for the next slide.
Thank you. So just to go over some of the things that the HCCSP has achieved of recent, there is Solar Together. So that's a group buying scheme run by a company called iChooser, but with kind of input from the councils in a particular area. So the councils will provide things like data and kind of marketing and that sort of thing. So essentially residents have a scheme promoted to them where they can register their interest for solar panels, and with the amount of people that register their interest, we can then get a kind of group buying discount and offer them solar panels for a kind of reduced rate compared to what the typical market rate would be if they tried to go and procure solar panels just individually. So we've run 2 rounds of that, as we mentioned earlier. So each round of that has done a mail out to 100,000 plus households across the county using Mosaic data, which was provided by County Council. And then there's also kind of other marketing, so newsletters, website, and social media and that kind of thing. And in the first round, 12,787 people across Hertfordshire registered their interest in the scheme. And 1,028 households went on to have solar panels installed through that scheme, which meant there was a total of 10,557 solar panels installed across Hertfordshire from the first round of the scheme. I think North Herts had the second highest uptake after St Albans, and we did some really good comms on that. The second round had 5,193 registrations of interest, and a total of 638 households ended up signing up, and 6,390 panels. And the installation for that is ongoing, as we discussed earlier. The HCCSP also drove the delivery of a habitat or a biodiversity baseline for Hertfordshire. So essentially, it was an assessment of all the land across Hertfordshire, regardless of land type or ownership, using various data sets, including data sets we were provided from the Hertfordshire Ecological Record Centre, as well as then aerial photography. And it essentially identified around 5 million polygons. It split Hertfordshire into these 5 million polygons, all of different sizes and shapes, because the polygons are sort of about individual habitats. And each polygon was assigned a biodiversity score using the Natural England Biodiversity Metric, which is also what's being used to assess biodiversity net gain. So this baseline is kind of useful in the biodiversity net gain process. It can also be used in strategic site allocation stage of planning, and also it's really useful for the local nature recovery strategy, which we just talked about. So that's kind of going to be like a baseline that we use for assessing what nature there is in Hertfordshire, what habitats there are in Hertfordshire, and whether the projects we're doing are improving it. There's also been various training opportunities. So there's been training opportunities for planners and sustainability officers provided through our membership of the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership. And the point of that was to try and train planners on sustainability and then train sustainability officers on planning, so that we can kind of talk to each other better and kind of enable joint working and engagement with each other when there's kind of key projects like local plans or local plan reviews and supplementary planning document development. There's also been training on climate adaptation, and that's been provided to officers in a range of departments from all the councils, so property services, estates, waste, planning, sustainability officers, to kind of get climate adaptation on everyone's radar about what it means for their services and for the wider district. We also developed the climate change risk log. So the adaptation subgroup of the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership, their sort of first project was asking each district to go away and create a risk log, which identified risks to council services from climate change and then risks to the wider district from climate change. Roger asked me a question earlier about the Gulf Stream and if that's in there as a risk. That's not in there as a risk, because the way that the assessment is broken down is that the risks are plotted against four types of extreme weather. So there's extreme heat, drought, flooding, and then wind and storms. And the risks to both the district and council services are all kind of plotted against, these are the risks to waste collection in the instances of extreme heat, or these are the risks to residents in the district in cases of wind and storms. I have been asked a question recently about whether we should be including cold snaps or extreme cold weather as one of those kind of categories of weather. And obviously, if the Gulf Stream is no more, then the weather, because it plays a part in moderating our climate, the weather of the UK would likely drop. It would be colder. So I think I would have to go back to the adaptation subgroup and ask them about the possibility of adding that as a category, extreme cold weather or kind of change in temperature, and that's maybe incorporated. Those risk assessments, so yeah, each district went away and did their own, into a county-wide climate risk log, and an action plan is now being developed to kind of evaluate the opportunities across the district to work on adaptation, and hopefully be in a position, in case future funding becomes available on adaptation, to kind of say that we've already identified our risks and what actions could be taken around those risks. Roger, you've got your hand up.
Just a quick one on that. It's supposed to be likely to happen before the end of the century, and it would cause the average temperature in Hertfordshire to drop 10 degrees. The likely reason that your risk people don't want to do anything about that risk is that they don't have a handle to it. And spending an infinite amount of money wouldn't enable Hertfordshire to be able to cope with it. So it's an impossible risk to actually accommodate in a risk register.
Yes, and I think because it's climate adaptation, a lot of the risks that are identified are kind of, we've tried to identify risks that we could realistically do something about, whereas if we kind of say that the stream might no longer exist, the council itself can't exert an influence over whether we still have or don't have the Gulf Stream. But we might be able to kind of identify risks associated with those temperatures being lower as a result of not having the Gulf Stream. But that's also quite a difficult message to balance with, on the one hand, kind of saying, oh, we think we're going to be at increased likelihood of extreme heat, and then on the other hand saying, but equally, we could be a lot colder. So I'll ask the subgroup about that. Right, so what's the next thing on here? So there's also the HCCSP also put together a joint successful bid for the Levi Fund, which is local electric vehicle infrastructure. So across Hertfordshire, 6 million and 15 1,000 was 1. That's obviously going to be split between the Hertfordshire Authority, so it works out about 600k each. And essentially it's about kind of scaling up local charge points for electric vehicles. So where that's at the moment is that there was an issue around the procurement framework that we were trying to use, which it was a national issue. I think that procurement framework was called into question, so we're a bit delayed in the process compared to where we were hoping to be. But by the autumn, we should be back on track, and by the autumn, the tender should be being signed between the local authorities and whoever is the chosen charge point operator. Then there is the Hertfordshire Retrofit Guide. So the partnership was very keen that they wanted to do something around retrofit, because a huge amount of emissions are kind of produced by domestic properties, and a huge amount of properties in Hertfordshire have an EPC of below C, which kind of indicates that they are in need of retrofitting. So we kind of explored that there are those who are able to pay for retrofitting and those who are unable to pay, and it's quite challenging in some ways without kind of greater government funding to help those who are unable to pay, because we don't have loads of money to support those people ourselves. So for the moment, we decided to do a survey to assess other barriers to retrofitting and kind of ask people how far they had got along with considering retrofitting for their own homes. That survey had pretty good uptake across Hertfordshire, and I think North Herts had quite a good return. I think we had one of the best response rates on that survey, and one of the key things was highlighted from those responses was a kind of lack of knowledge about what retrofitting measures any individual could do to their own home, and kind of how they would go about finding trustworthy people to implement those measures. So the partnership produced a retrofitting guide, and that guide has various pieces of information about retrofitting, and it also identifies kind of a number of key housing archetypes that exist across Hertfordshire, and then it goes through the kind of likely retrofit measures that would be suitable for you, and kind of how cost heavy those are depending on your type of house. So that guide was published recently, I think last week or the week before, and the link to it is there, and we're going to be doing some promotion of that shortly. And then the last thing I've got on this slide is a successful bid to be part of the LARA, or the Local Area Retrofit Accelerator pilot project. So that is around developing a local area retrofit plan or strategy. It's a kind of pilot project, so we're one of a few pilot projects in the country for that, and it'll be around setting up local delivery groups and then monitoring and evaluating the implementation of the strategy that we create. So that should kind of hopefully help to fill in some of those gaps around both the able to pay and the not able to pay for retrofitting residents. Next slide, please. I think we're getting towards the end now. So just to touch on the growth board. So we talked earlier about how the HCCSP kind of report up to the growth board. So the Hertfordshire Growth Board focuses on working with residents and communities, public sector organisations and businesses to achieve sustainable growth for Hertfordshire. The people that attend those meetings are the leaders and the CEOs of each council, and the board recently launched their 6 missions for the county. So that's world-class economy, digital access for all, transport for Hertfordshire, sustainable county, healthy and safe places for all, and right homes, right place. So I've highlighted the sustainable county mission. I should say that sustainability does kind of run as a theme through the other missions as well. But I've highlighted the Sustainable County mission because the HCCSP is noted as a key partner, and particularly within that mission, it's given a specific remit. And one of the things it's given a specific remit around, which is going to be our kind of first project that we're sort of doing with the Growth Board, is development of a local area energy plan. So there's a kind of working group for that. And that will be progressing, and we'll be reporting back to the Growth Board on our progress on that. Next slide, please. I think the last slide is Ellie. Is that right? Yeah.
Just got a question from Roger. Got your hand up, Roger.
Yeah, sorry, going back a slide.
Yeah.
It was concerning Oh, I've lost it. I forget what it. Oh, it was about the Heritage Foundation's rules, design principles conflicting with your retrofit guidelines. If there's a conflict between the two, does that give a legal problem between you and the Heritage Foundation?
No, because so the are you talking about the retrofit guidance booklet that's been created?
Yes.
Yeah, so this guidance booklet is not, it's not to stipulate what people can and can't have done. It's to kind of say to people who are unsure about retrofitting, you know, if you've got a classic sort of Victorian terrace house, these are the things that you can likely do, and these are the things that you probably can't do. If you've got a kind of mid-century modern house, these are the things that you can probably do, and these are the things that you probably can't do. It's not stipulating what people can and can't do. And I guess in terms of the Heritage Foundation, it wouldn't create any kind of legal issue because it's more guidance. And we have noted in the retrofitting guidance booklet, we have noted that there are specific design principles that need to be abided by for the garden city areas of Hertfordshire, so both Letchworth and Welwyn, which might mean that some of the things that we're saying are the kind of key, you know, the key things to be done to, for example, like a 1930s semi-detached house might not apply, or you might need to make extra considerations if you're in Letchworth or Welwyn, and then we've linked them to the kind of appropriate guidance for those areas.
But a householder could take a legal case to court and say, the council says I should do this, they recommend this is a good practice. The Heritage Foundation say you can't, and that would present the Heritage Foundation with a legal problem, wouldn't it?
I think probably not, because there's this page on it's not, this guidance is not stipulation, it's kind of just giving people, it's kind of just providing people with more knowledge and information, and there is this page in the document specifically about conservation and heritage areas where we acknowledge that there are different design rules that need to be considered in those specific areas. So we've kind of acknowledged the design principles of the Heritage Foundation in the document, and telling people that live in that heritage area that they actually need to consult with the Heritage Foundation. Rather,
the new government might put more emphasis on that and make it more mandatory than just advisory, perhaps.
Possibly.
Can I quickly come in on that as well? Just to say, yeah, so the Heritage Foundation are actively looking at how they can encourage retrofit in their heritage properties. So I think, it'd be interesting to see how that how that changes and emerges over the next year or so. So worth keeping an eye on.
Thanks, James.
I think Sue's got a hand up as well. You're still on mute, Sue. I wonder if I can unmute you. Hang on. No, I can't. I can't unmute you, Sue. You're right. Can you try and do it again your end, or I might ask Caroline, who's hosting, if she's able to do it.
You're muted, Sue.
Yeah, I can't do it at my end, and I don't think Caroline can either. Okay, so if you can't unmute, can I just let you try and sort that? You might have to go out and come back in again or something, unless you're something on there's froze, because you're going to be talking in a minute. Right, if we go back to George for the moment, and then I'll keep an eye on you. And
I think if we go to the last slide, it's Ellie.
Okay, so if we go to Ellie for the last slide, and then we'll try and sort Sue out with her technical issues.
Thank you. So yeah, just to finish up our presentation, we just wanted to highlight some of the previously discussed topics for the Cabinet Panel on the Environment. So obviously they're listed there. So yeah, we've had biodiversity, I think at the previous meeting in March, biodiversity net gain, the local nature recovery strategy, water sustainability, and we had some of the water companies come along to that. Reducing food waste, and the same for Christmas time, climate change adaptation, and the sustainability SPDs, as we've sort of discussed today already. So we've had some potential suggestions for future meetings. So district design code, sort of from the planning team, retrofitting, sort of in light of the new HCCSP retrofit guide, and the local nature recovery strategy updates, sort of with the ongoing engagement events at the minute. So ahead of our next item, sort of with public participation, we'd just like to ask people to think about sort of what role do you envisage the panel having, and how you would like to see the meetings work in future. So we're going to discuss that during the work programme scoping item. So yeah, it's just kind of a plea to get people thinking about what they want to see from the panel in future. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ellie. Right, okay. Joe's got his hand up, so he's coming in with a question, and Sue has just unmuted herself. Hang on there. Okay, Sue, your question would have been related to the slides we were just looking at as well. So if I take you first, now that you're unmuted, and then I'll take Joe, and then we'll move on to the next bit.
It was a question I put in the chat and didn't get answered. It was really about social housing. I'm just very interested in, is there a policy or any way in which you can affect social housing and the installation of solar panels?
I can't see that question. So do you mean that for social housing tenants to be able to have solar panels, it be done by housing associations?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So we didn't specifically engage with the housing associations through the Solar Together project, because that was initially aimed at kind of private residents, and then it was sort of extended to do a bit of promotion in the second round to kind of community groups, businesses, but the vast majority of the uptake that we got was from private residents still. So nothing through the Solar Together scheme. I know Settle were successful last year in winning money from central government to do some kind of sustainability retrofitting measures on their houses, but I'm not sure if solar panels were included in that or if it was more kind of energy efficiency measures. But I can try and find out the detail on whether any solar panels have been included as part of that money that they won.
I'd be grateful if you do, because it strikes me as a glaring absence in this whole policy, you know, that these are people who are most likely to be on low incomes and least likely to be able to face the costs of heating. And it strikes me as very urgent that this should be actually addressed.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Joe had his hand up next, and then it's Roger.
I did. I may have an answer for Sue that Settle is installing solar panels on their houses, because in the village where I live in rural Hitchin in Breachwood Green, some of the properties have got solar panels being installed this week. So I think they have had some funding. On another point for a future topic discussion, as the last slide suggested, I may add or propose that we look at this issue that we've got in my area where 2,500 residents are having to drive to Harpenden or Stevenage, 8 miles there, 8 miles back, and we've got a tidy tip in Luton. How is that how is that conducive with carbon neutrality? It's just madness. I have bombarded Hertfordshire, Richard Roberts, to try and get some sort of agreement, but I think it's important with all of our being green and climate change that we support this, and any support together to move this one on would be greatly appreciated. I hope other people would see where I'm coming from, but it's something that is really nagging me right now.
Thank you. I've noted that down.
So I know that with cross-boundary work, obviously Luton's in Bedfordshire and we're Hertfordshire, and we've had endless issues back and forth between Essex, Cambridgeshire, Bedfordshire, with regards to people who live on the borders. And yes, it would just make more sense to go to the coastal one, but which is the council that you pay the council tax to, and it would be good to have a more geographical safe element that would involve. I think it's a fantastic idea. I really think there needs to be something set with regards to how we actually use the services that are closest to us, not just the ones that are within our authority. It comes under a similar element of when you look at things like NHS trusts, depending on what trust you're in, depends on what hospital you go to. It would be good to see more overlapping and things just making a bit more sense when it comes to travel.
Just like add, Amy, that the kids in Luton can come to school in Hertfordshire, but I can't dump my rubbish in Luton 2 miles down the road. I've got to travel 8 miles to Harpenden. It's madness when we're trying to promote being green. It's just madness. So yeah, I get your sentiment.
Absolutely
there.
right.
Yeah.
It's a very valid point as well, by the way, that there can be that cross element for one thing, but not the other. But yeah, anyway, I'm very mindful of time, and we've got more things to get through. Roger's got his hand up and Sue's got her hand up. So Roger, if you go first.
Just a few quick points. Risk registers. The local plan for 2031 to 2050 really must contain a new town in North Hertfordshire if it's going to have to repeat the achievements of the previous local plan without the environmental and sustainability problems that plan has created. So it is a risk that we're not taking the next local plan seriously, and council's not putting effort into considering a new town next year. That's one quick point. A second quick point on SPDs, I think the council's really to be congratulated on getting gold, silver and bronze building standards written into that SPD. I don't know how you managed it, and I hope you managed to keep it in. It won't get redacted or whatever, but that's a really good achievement. It begs the question, if it stays in, are you going to set targets? And wouldn't it be nice to set some sort of reasonable target for the number of gold and other standards? It would be nice, of course, to be all gold standard. The last point on that SPD is that to achieve the biggest problem with the gold standard is the additional cost. Well, if you're building 100 houses in an estate, you can get the economy of scale by building to gold standard by having a pop-up factory which builds SIP panels. All it is woodworking filled with insulation. You have a pop-up factory, you make the SIP panels on site for all 100 houses, and you knock it down afterwards. And that way you can bring the cost of a gold standard house down to comparable with other houses. So there shouldn't be a financial argument for not building to gold standard. One other quick point that Joe just made about transport problems around Luton, Stevenage, Hitchin. Luton Airport is doubling in size. They're building 900 houses east of Luton. It will be quicker for those people living east of Luton to get to Hitchin railway station or Stevenage station than it will be to get round the airport or round Vauxhalls to get into the centre of Luton. That's a risk, and that's something that needs to be taken into account in county thinking. I think I've used up my time, but thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Roger. I have lost Sue.
No, I'm here.
You're there. Hello. Right. So your hand
here.
hadn't gone up. Your hand was no longer up, so it's gone off the thing. Right, Sue. So your hand was up.
It was up, and it was because I wasn't getting answered on the chat. So you actually have answered my question about social housing. Thank you.
Marvellous. Okay. Any other comments or questions that anyone would like to put forward? Not seeing any. Okay. Right. So with that, I think that's the end of that item. Unless anyone else. George? That's the end of that item, isn't it?
Only just to thank the three officers for a really good report.
I do that at the end, Mick.
Oh, well, you've got to strike while the iron's hot.
Okay, well, as always, a fantastic and brilliant report from the three of you. You're always absolutely on it, and I'm always very, very impressed. Right. Now, I've got item 5, public participation. I'd like to now invite Sue Lyons to provide the panel with a verbal presentation. And Sue, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. I began on this sort of trajectory thinking about citizens' assemblies that were pioneered by XR, but I've thought a lot about it over the last 24 hours, and I've come off that kind of platform. But I'm actually quite seriously thinking about my disappointment in having attended two of the HSSCP meetings that were set up, which seem to really be missed opportunities to engage with local groups, of which I was representing one, and a lot of my friends were there, because it seems to me to be about the official ways in which councils engage, which I'm not knocking in any way at all. But I do think that there are a lot of people, possibly in social housing, and possibly who are not political animals, who get missed off this agenda. Now, Ellie earlier did talk about, and I didn't make a note at the time, but it did strike me that there was some research somewhere that is looking into how you engage with ordinary people who have major issues around the whole climate catastrophe that we're facing. And I would like to know more about what is actually happening now, because it does strike me that the kind of roadshows that used to happen don't anymore. The opportunities to talk to people about how they're engaging with their personal issues around housing. Maybe their social housing is not putting panels on their roofs. Maybe their houses are leaky as hell. I'm very interested in what is being thought about, or in fact happening that I don't know about, to improve the lot of ordinary people who are facing enormous challenges with low incomes and leaky, horrid houses. Possibly could be doing a lot more with engagement. I'm thinking of things like a gazebo in the town centre on a regular basis in different towns. Are these things being thought about? Are these things happening and I just don't know about them? That's where I'm coming from.
I can try and answer a bit of that. So I might ask you some more questions as well, Sue. So I suppose in terms of, for example, engaging with people on low incomes around retrofitting, if it's their kind of houses that they've got a particular problem with, if their houses are drafty, if their houses are not energy efficient. Most councils don't have the budgets to kind of pay for residents to have those measures done. So how it's kind of been recently is that we've relied on money from central government to come into us to then help those residents. And there have been various schemes over the last few years. So there's been the Sustainable Warmth Scheme, which targeted on gas properties, and that was for people earning under a certain amount of money. It was around £30,000, and that was to have free retrofitting done to their house, and they would get a free EPC survey. Someone will come around and then identify the most appropriate measures for them to have their house retrofitted to improve reduce the emissions that are generated from heating that house, but also make the house more comfortable for them to live in. And that has all kinds of associated benefits, improving health outcomes for people that have respiratory problems and that sort of thing. So there was that scheme. There was also the home upgrade grant scheme that we talked about earlier. That's in its phase 2 now, but there's also a kind of phase 1, and that one's targeted. It's very similar to Sustainable Warmth, but that one's targeted at off-gas properties rather than on mains gas properties. But the same kind of thing in terms of someone coming to your house, doing the EPC survey, identifying the appropriate measures for your house to make it more comfortable. And again, that was targeted at people initially for the first round who were earning under £30,000 or £31,000. And now that's been increased to £36,000. So anyone that's in an off-gas property, EPC, D, E, F or G, and who is earning under £36,000 is eligible for that scheme. The scheme that Councillor Graziano asked about earlier, that's Eco Flex. So ECO is the energy company obligation scheme, and people can apply if someone is in receipt of certain benefits, for example, universal credit, they can apply to have the energy companies essentially pay for these retrofitting measures to make their home more comfortable. However, there are some people that ordinary people that might benefit from having these retrofitting measures done to their homes who can't afford it, but are not in receipt of, you know, universal credit, for example. And some of the things that, you know, might warrant somebody needing these retrofitting measures are, for example, health issues that they face or that someone in their family faces. So the scheme that Councillor Graziani mentioned, that's the Energy Company Obligation Scheme Flex. So it's Eco Flex. And the flex part of it means that essentially the local authority for a particular area can be involved in shaping the criteria, shaping a kind of criteria which extends beyond people who are on benefits. So it can extend to include people that have an NHS referral saying that their health would benefit from having their house retrofitted, for example, and it also extends to people earning under a certain amount of money per year. And I think that's a similar kind of threshold to the other schemes that I've just mentioned. So that's where we're working to, that's where we're looking to work with the National Energy Foundation, NEF, to set up this scheme with them. So what will happen, hopefully, if we can get it off the ground, is that we'll work with them, we'll publish our kind of criteria, which will include those kind of those elements of, you know, eligibility on the basis of health, eligibility on the basis of income, and then people can apply to that scheme. And the role of the authority will be to kind of verify that those people are eligible against the criteria that we've shaped with the National Energy Foundation. And then the National Energy Foundation have a list of trusted installers who they then organise to go and do that installation. And that is energy company obligation. So that is all paid for by the energy companies because it's their obligation. So those are the kind of main ways that we've kind of been kind of working on retrofitting projects to benefit ordinary people. There's also the stuff, you know, that we talked about earlier that the housing associations can do. So there's pots of money that central government have that they can apply to kind of retrofit social housing stock. And they do update us on, Settle do update us on what's going on with that and how many properties they're retrofitting and how much money they've got. But we as a council don't really have a role in helping them apply because they do that application. They make a decision about which homes they're retrofitting with the money that they win. For example, when you kind of said about having a gazebo, did you mean what was that to engage particularly on kind of making people's homes more comfortable, or was that generally to engage on climate issues?
I think an opportunity to catch people when they're out shopping, when they're not thinking about it, and they actually think, gosh, I've always thought about this and wanted an answer, and they're actually out and about. You catch them then. Yeah, and it's people who are, I mean, a lot of your things have been about people in private housing on low incomes. I'm very interested in the government's sustainable warmth scheme because, well, I don't get the feeling that it's actually reaching a lot of the people that I know. It doesn't seem to be heating their houses. And I have to say that I just had an EPC done on my house, which is cold, unless I have the heating up really high. And I have been assessed as a B. It's unbelievable. And I just think that they're unhelpful, these EPCs. They don't tell the real story. You put in some energy efficient light bulbs and you put some lagging in your loft and you get a B. That's exactly what's happened to me. So I think that we've got a huge agenda around this and we're being very disingenuous about the whole thing. Sorry, speech over.
That's okay. Yeah, that's something that we can feed back to government because they set the criteria. We don't unfortunately set the criteria for all those funding pots. So that's something that we can feed back to central government. And I take your point about it not reaching a lot of the people that you know are in need. The pots are very, they look big when you see the number written on paper, but the amount of houses that pays for retrofitting for is small.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you, Georgina, for answering those questions. Right, if that's that, then can I suggest that on the back of that we then go on to the work programme scoping for our future meetings, because I feel like off the back of that we'll probably be able to come up with a fair few items. So if I just go to George to lead on that.
Yeah, so this is really just to kind of talk about what topics you'd like to see come to future meetings, and also if anybody has ideas for what do you want the panel to achieve, what do you see its role being, how do you envisage the meetings working, what things do you want to hear about the meetings, so we can have a bit of a discussion about it now. But if people want to email either me or the environment panel at north-hearts.gov.uk inbox in the kind of next week or so, that would also be helpful if people want to have a bit more of a think and then come back to me with ideas. So I throw it over to everybody else.
Yeah, I think that would actually be a really good idea. Obviously, people can ask some questions now, but it might be worthwhile if everyone takes the opportunity to kind of a think, process some things, maybe take a look for yourself. I know I tend to sort of maybe think of something a little while later when I've had the chance to have everything kind of bed in. So, you know, everyone's welcome to not have to just submit tonight. You can submit over the next week or so via email. Georgina, would you mind just typing out the email address in the chat?
Yes, I will grab
So
that.
I can't remember if there's a hyphen or a dash or a dot in there somewhere, just so everyone gets the right details.
Yeah.
Stu, your hand is still up. Is that a legacy hand, or are you wanting to submit something?
Sorry, didn't
You
take
won't
it
go
down.
now.
Beg your
That's
pardon.
fine.
Right.
Ah, couldn't unmute, and then you couldn't put your hand down. Right. John's got his hand up.
Yes, I wanted to say something before I forget, or don't respond to it because I'll be away. And that is at the engagement on the local nature recovery strategy yesterday.
Yeah.
The briefing made it clear that Hertfordshire in particular has a huge responsibility for the world's chalk streams. I mean, a really big responsibility, and that some of them are here in North Hertfordshire. And so it seems to me that we have our one huge global responsibility is our chalk streams.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
And I wonder whether, since it's that important, there could be government or even international funding. If there were a plan, it would probably need to be Herts wide, but it would certainly need to engage other agencies like the Environment Agency, National Rivers Authority, and so on.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I think it's something that hasn't been that visible, except at member of UK Parliament level.
Yeah.
Well, there has been a good deal of activity, but it hasn't been carried through to the same extent at a local level, except by local groups, which indeed may have been well supported by local authorities, including North Herts. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I just want to emphasize that.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think it's something we could definitely consider as a topic for the panel. And I think yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it's about 10% of the world's chalk streams are in Hertfordshire. So I would imagine that as part of that local nature recovery strategy, that is going to probably end up being one of the key priorities of that strategy. But we can definitely kind of put that down as a potential topic, and if it does become a bigger part of the LNRS, then we can ask for an update on that as and when that progresses.
There might be huge potential there. That's really what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Thanks, Georgina.
Thank you.
I think that's also a really great education opportunity as well. I mean, obviously the information is there, but it'd be really good to kind of put it on blast, as it were.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Indeed. Has it been a very hyper-local thing as well? That'd be a good thing to maybe sort of take to schools, maybe not necessarily by us, but by actual nature and environment groups. I've got Claire Strong.
Yeah, just on the chalk streams. I mean, there's quite a lot of monitoring because obviously there are the chalk streams that we have around in the district, and we know the one down that in Tom Tyson's near Ashwell, some of the issues they've had there, where because of water abstraction. I mean, one of the things that I suppose say again, which is linked, is for those that know the area of Orton Head, which is the spring for the River Hiss, Affinity Water are now building their a plant because sorry?
They're building a weir.
No, I'm not talking about the weir. No, I'm not talking about the weir at Orton Head. I'm talking about what Affinity Water are doing to their pumping station, for which they have planning application to put a nitrate filtration plant in so that they can start abstracting water again. And again, I think, you know, as something that's going to happen in our district, again, we need to be aware that that is going to happen, and then to make sure that we are monitoring if that has any impact onto the source of the River Hiss, which bubbles up, if you know, to Orton Head.
Mm-hmm.
The weir is a different the weir is a different issue. That's where the little crayfish managed to upset the bank, so that they've now, but that's the Environment Agency, and I think that finally they've come up with a plan of what they're going to do at the weir by the mill. And I know that, you know, as North Herts District Council, we have budgeted money to actually put the repair in for that.
Yeah.
That's really useful and interesting. Thank you, Claire. Okay.
You're most welcome.
Roger, you got your hand up. And you are on mute. There you go.
Yes, very quickly. The Orton Heads are really important from an emergency planning viewpoint. I know that's not the subject of this committee, but in the whole of Hertfordshire, most of the surface water is contaminated one way or another. There isn't a viable well, and it is a domestic well that you can pull drinking water out of. But there are two places in the whole of Hertfordshire that you can go and get drinking water out of the stream, in Orton Head, and similarly the source of the River Wimram are two sources of drinking water directly out of the ground. They're the only two in the whole of Hertfordshire. You didn't know that you needed to know that, but I thought I'd throw it in.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Roger. I did wonder about freshwater element when it came to, like as Claire pointed out, regarding the abstraction, how much that would affect it if there's a freshwater element going on as well, because there's actually a very limited amount of freshwater on the planet. Okay, thank you, Roger. Just going to double check that. I think I can see George furiously writing everything down.
Yeah.
Just double checking if there's any other comments or questions for future topics. Again, obviously the thing is open for at least the next week or so, if people want to sort of send in thoughts and ideas, and we can then just collaborate, condense, etc., from it all.
Yeah, and if people think of topics, you know, things might pop up during the year, and we can always kind of revise the work program as well. Yeah.
I've just seen sorry, Claire. I've just seen the comment about revival or revive. Sorry, River Ivel. There's a very good handle on
Revival.
This. Revival. Yeah. Revival. Okay.
You're
right. Yeah, you're something wrong with your sound, Amy. But just
am I crackly? Hang on, I'll just mute.
You're very crackly. You're a bit crackly and you're a bit robotic the way you're talking.
That's just normal.
Is it now?
Yeah, right.
I as a group for this group, and given that we have the new voice contract coming in April, May next year, given that recycling has to be one of the big topics, I would hope that towards the end of the year, probably early next year, we perhaps as a group could be engaging on having a quick look at what all the comms is going to be that's going to go out to try and encourage everybody to be recycling more, and how they're going to manage waste in the future. That would just be what I would think this environment panel should be looking at.
I think that's a really good suggestion, and it's kind of, it's nice because it's not just implementation, it's topical, and it's something where we can hopefully feed into what's going to go out. So I think that's a great suggestion.
I would hope that they might want to run some of the stuff by us, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Councillor, you give me an open opportunity to talk about bins.
Rubbish, actually, Amy, rubbish.
Marvellous. I can talk rubbish all day. I'm not going to let anyone come back on that. So let me just have a see. Am I still sounding robotic? I've just plugged my laptop in. I did wonder if the battery getting a bit low was causing an issue.
It's slightly, it's not too bad, but it is slightly. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try not to talk too quickly or too much. Any other questions or comments from anybody? Can't see any hands popping up. Okay, I'm mindful of time. It's 10:15 and we've still got the review of the environmental panel action tracker.
So very briefly, so this is just essentially to say that given that we're at the start of the new civic year, we're proposing to take the action tracker away and completely revamp it if the panel is happy with that. And the reason for that is because some of the actions are quite vague. So there's stuff like consider how we can best encourage active or public transport to and within our towns, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not a kind of smart, specific, measurable, I can't remember what the A is, realistic and time scale. It's not very smart. So as an action, so with some of these actions, it's kind of hard. It's hard to ever close them off or say they're complete because they are so broad. And for example, with that one of, consider how we could best encourage active travel, that's probably something that we're going to be doing for many, many decades. So we want to take it away, rework it, make the actions smarter, and have a think about how actions get on this tracker, who decides what goes on, and how we make them smart. So if the panel is happy with that, that is something we will take away. Like, I think I saw that John was very enthusiastic for the rework.
So unless there's major dissent, I'm going to presume that everyone's happy for that to be made less clunky and more smarter, or better words than that. Okay.
And if there's things that actually as actions aren't really actions, just take them off completely. Just lose them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Streamline it a bit. There we go. I think that's the word.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. And then we can review that in the future when it goes out and it's on ModGov and the panel can see it. We can always have some feedback and such. Of course, the email address is always open. Officers are always on it to see. Okay, so was there anything else, George, with that, or is that the end of that piece?
I think that was the end of that piece. Yeah.
Okay, with it being 10:15, I'm now going to wrap up the meeting. I'm sure you'll all be delighted to hear. That's been a long one. Thank you so much for those who've managed to stick to the end, and I do appreciate that some people had to head off early. Thank you so much to Georgina Chapman, Ellie Hollingsworth, James Lees, Caroline Jenkins, and James Lovegroves for the work they've put into having this meeting happen tonight. Thank you very much to the panel of councillors who are here, and really appreciate you taking the time and the comments and questions that you've brought in. And very much again, thank you to the public who have come and joined us and asked great questions, given great presentations, and generally given us quite a bit of food for thought. I think that was everybody. And the next meeting is likely to be the 9th of October. I know it's scheduled at the moment for the 16th, but we are looking to change it. So please keep an eye on your diaries. Make sure you pencil that in so you don't miss it. I think that's everything. Thank you so much, everybody, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Night.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Right, so Georgina, are you right to hang on when everyone's gone?
Yeah.
And Caroline and Ellie even.
Yeah.